Throughout this tutorial, we're gonna have a great time both shooting and editing video. But before we get into that, let's talk about the best camera settings for shooting video in general. The first thing that we're going to talk about is resolution. And as you probably already know, resolution refers to the amount of pixels that make up an image. If we look back just a few years, standard definition TV was 640 pixels by 480. Next up, we had HD ready TVs that were 1280 by 720 pixels. We then moved into full HD, which was 1920 by 1080. Both of these resolutions are usually just referred to as either 720 or 1080, which is based on the pixel height of each of these resolutions. So in many cases, people consider 720 and 1080 to be HD, but today we've moved into UHD or Ultra HD, which starts at 4K resolution. That's 3840 by 2160 pixels. So if you're familiar with still cameras, 1080 is about 2 megapixels and 4K is 8 megapixels. 4 different 1080 screens will fit in a 4K video format. Now, over the next few years, I'm sure we will have even higher resolutions. There are a couple of 8K displays out on the market already, and there may be a couple of cameras that can shoot 8K as well, but these are extremely expensive, and it may be 5 or 10 years before we see this in consumer products. So the bottom line is, you probably want to shoot with the highest resolution that your camera will allow. For this tutorial, we're going to be shooting in 4K, even though we plan on downsampling this video into 1080, and I would suggest you guys do the exact same. Now, if your camera doesn't shoot 4K, don't worry about that at all. There are tons of super expensive professional video cameras that can't shoot any more than 1080p. So don't worry about that. Feel free to shoot with whatever camera you currently have, and you'll be able to follow along throughout this entire tutorial.
Now, when you're setting the resolution on your camera, in many cases you're going to see the letter I or the letter P after the resolution. So for example, you might see 1080p or 1080i. The I stands for interlace, and basically what that means is the camera is pulling every other row of pixels. So the bottom line is the interlace format is a lower quality format to record in. And if you have the option to shoot in, say, 1080p, you're definitely going to want to choose that setting. P stands for progressive, and basically this means that for every frame that your camera films, you're going to have the entire resolution captured all at once. Now, most cameras typically shoot in progressive, so if you're setting your resolution and you see 1080 but it does not have an I or a P, you're probably going to be shooting in progressive, which is going to give you the highest quality.
So now you know which resolution to choose, but you may have also noticed that your camera can change its video format as well. Just like a still camera could shoot in JPEG or RAW, your video camera may have options also. Now, two of the most common file formats are .mp4 and .mov, and I wish I could tell you which one was significantly better than the other, but it really comes down to the particular camera that you're going to be using. Definitely check out your user manual, and it might tell you which one they would suggest you use depending on what you're going to be doing with the footage. Now, both of these file formats are compressed file formats, just like shooting a JPEG on a still camera. But if you buy a really expensive professional video camera, it may actually be able to shoot in RAW, just like a still camera. These cameras are wildly expensive, and the RAW file format on video can take up a massive amount of space. Here at F-Stoppers, we actually don't own one of these cameras. We've actually never shot in RAW before when it comes to video. And so it's something that you certainly shouldn't be worried about, especially at the beginning of your video career. We personally choose .mp4 because that container is a little bit more universal, but in all honesty, I think you would do fine with either one.
Another component that's going to make up the quality of your video is your bit rate. And basically what bit rate is the amount of data that your camera is recording per second. This is measured in megabits per second. Now, sometimes you might notice a low bit rate when you're watching TV and you see a really dynamic scene like a national football game with a bunch of confetti coming down. You're going to notice that all the detail is kind of pixelated. And that's because there's not enough bit rate to accurately portray all of those individual pixels every single second. So we can infer that a higher bit rate is going to allow us to create a higher quality video. Now, in most consumer level cameras, at 1080p, you're generally going to get about 25 megabits per second. And if you were to shoot at 4K, you're going to get 4 times that at 100 megabits per second. But if you have a more professional camera, in many cases you can actually record at 1080 or 4K with an even higher bitrate. Now, if you have a camera that shoots in RAW, this bitrate can be astronomical. It can be 1,000 to 2,000 megabits per second. So if you do shoot in the RAW format, keep in mind you're going to be using a lot of data both to record on your memory card and to store the footage later on an external drive. Now, not all cameras allow you to choose the actual bitrate that you're recording in. So if you're shooting with a DSLR, you might only have the recording options of low, medium, and high, but this is changing the bitrate, so you're definitely going to want to choose the highest setting possible.
So now you know what bit rate is, but do you know what bit depth is? This is something that I just recently learned about myself. Most video cameras and most displays for that matter are 8-bit, which means there are 256 shades of red, blue, and green. When you multiply all of these together, you can see that we can get over 16 million different color combinations. Now, that may seem like a ton of different colors, and you're right, it is, but when you start editing your footage, sometimes you will notice that there's some banding issues in 8-bit footage once you color grade it. Some cameras, like our GH5 here, has the option to shoot in either 8-bit or 10-bit. And with 10-bit, we get 1,024 shades of red, blue, and green. When we multiply all of those together, you can see that we get over 1 billion different color combinations per pixel. Even though the vast majority of people cannot actually play back 10-bit footage, having those extra colors is good when you get back into post-processing and you want to tweak things, even if you plan on exporting the footage in 8-bit. Now, you can imagine all that extra data is going to take up a lot more space, and it will increase your bit rate. For that reason, we've actually never shot in 10-bit. It really slows the whole editing process down. So if we were shooting something super important like a TV commercial, we would certainly upgrade and shoot in 10-bit. But for the majority of this tutorial, and for all of you guys following along at home, sticking with 8-bit is probably going to be totally fine.
Now, another setting that you have in your camera that's going to really determine the look of your video is the color profile. Now, if you were shooting in RAW, we could take this video footage into our video editor and give all of our footage a specific look, just like you could do with photos. But because we're shooting in a compressed format, we're actually going to burn the color profile into the footage itself. So if you're shooting on a Canon, Nikon, or Sony camera, this is going to be called something different on each different brand. We shoot with Panasonic cameras, so this is called the photo style. So as you can see, as we cycle through these different color profiles, the colors change dramatically. Some of the images are more contrasty, while some of them are very, very flat. If you don't want to do any post-production on your videos, you might want to choose something that has more punch, more color, more contrast. It kind of gives a more finished look. Here at F-Stoppers, we like to shoot on a flat profile so that we can take this footage into Premiere and add our own color and contrast. Later in this tutorial, if you would like to follow along with us and start color grading your own footage, I would recommend shooting in the flattest profile so that you have the most flexibility.
So let's recap what we've learned. When it comes to resolution, you want to set your camera to the highest resolution for the highest quality video. If your camera can only shoot in 1080, that's totally fine, but make sure that if it gives you the option between 1080i and 1080p, you're going to want to choose 1080p. Next, read your camera's manual and figure out what video format you should be shooting in. We're going to be shooting in MP4. For the highest quality video, you're going to want to choose the highest bitrate. Your camera may not allow you to choose the bitrate exactly, and if not, you want to choose the high quality video option. When it comes to bit depth, most cameras shoot in 8-bit. 10-bit means more colors, but it also means much larger files. For that reason, we're going to be filming in 8-bit. And finally, if you want the most latitude when you get back into post-processing when it comes to color grading your footage, you're going to want to shoot in a flat color profile. Now, the final option that you'll have to consider is what frame rate you want to shoot in, and we're going to cover that in the very next lesson.